Harder, better, faster, stronger.
I'm going to ask Don Davidson, an ICIT fellow, and these Scrum programs, the Cyber SCRM programs lead at Synopsys, to come and kick off the panel. Come on up.
Work it, make it, do it, makes us.
No, you're supposed to sit there.
Wait. I thought we were going to Can you hear me?
I'm sorry.
Great. So welcome back from your networking break. We'll see how things go. We're the faster panel, so we'll try to get through this pretty quick.
Faster.
I think as we look at the whole concept of modernization, the bigger, stronger, faster, safer, more, I think the one thing that's missing is smarter. So all of those panels are talking about how do we do this smarter in the space. So when I think about faster, I immediately think cost, schedule, performance. And so we are very enamored with IT products. So how do we get things fast and cheap? And often we trade off sustainability and security, in that process. So how do we build that back in is one of our concerns. Also the differences in what I consider big A and little a. So how fast you turn the procurement is just buying the material. It's more important to look at the overall life cycle of how do you speed up the development of a capability and work that arena. In DoD, I know at least, that's a full DOTML PF, doctrine, organization, training, leader development. In industry, it's really people, processes, and technology, right? So you buy a new technology, it's going to change your people requirements, the processes, and the overall capability. So how do you build that into your process? We'll also try to touch somewhere on the U.S. national cybersecurity strategy in some way, shape, or form as we try to shift responsibility for hardware assurance, software assurance, from the user to the developer in some aspects for accountability. So I think that each of the panelists are well suited to give us a perspective of both public and private. We have very different perspectives of a CIO, a CISO, and an engineer architect, and we'll ask them to sort of flesh that out. Maybe a little different on this panel than the other panels in the fact that it's going to be less direct Q&A and maybe a little discussion among the panelists because there's lots of interaction. We've actually had some pretty lively discussions in our prep sessions and even at breakfast today. So if we could start on the far side and work this direction and just give sort of a self-introduction for who you are, what the organization you represent, and what you bring to the table today.
Sure. So my name is Rob Wood. I am the CISO at Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And my background is primarily in tech startups and tech consulting, things like that. And just, now I'm a Fed. That's me.
Okay, so Venus Goodwine, and I am currently the Director of Enterprise IT for the Department of the Air Force. And I would like you to remember the number 45, and I'll tell you why. But also currently I deliver IT services, but prior to that I was the CISO for Department of Agriculture. And so why I say the number 45? I am one department, 2 services. I have 5 functional CIOs. I have 10 combatant commanders where I deliver forces. I have 10 major commands. Why am I telling you those numbers? Because it's a large enterprise. So not only do I have the responsibility for air power, but also the space order battle as well. And so in the CIO, it's different when you're from a federal agency because now it's just not the business systems, it's also definitely the tactical communications where we take all of my enterprise capabilities and move them forward. And I love this topic because when we talk, faster, bigger, faster is in the eye of the beholder. For me, as a warfighting organization, faster is the speed of relevance. Does the warfighter have it when they need it? When they flip on the button, does it work? So that's important. But also, it's about delivering capabilities, but not just because I deliver them, it's when the warfighter uses that capability, does it meet the need? So I look forward to our conversation today just to talk about how the Air Force is doing things faster, with policy, processes, people, talent management, and some of the things we need to do from a priority standpoint. So look forward to the conversation today.
Back
And my name is Michael Ari. I'm the Executive Practice Engineer of QBE. I've been the CETA Technical Director, lead A&AS services for many different services in government organizations, both DoD, state, and local. A lot of what I do is come in and sit with the various CIOs, directors, and agency heads and help them chart out their course. What's their technological roadmap? What is their architecture? How do all these different technical specialties work together? And then how does that breed into an acquisition strategy, an RFP, a series of RFPs, and some type of alignment, and then get them all written, support them in source selections and oversight of execution. Currently, I'm working with AIT, a couple of different organizations through the Army, Foreign Military Sales, and I'm also the CETA technical lead for the Enterprise Cloud Management Agency of the Army.
Great. So I'd like to start off the first sort of question or discussion on the topic is the idea of a metric. So we immediately think faster means a faster contract. And I know, Michael, you talked about it earlier today at breakfast. It's not just about the speed of the contract. It's about how fast can I deliver the contract, can I deliver the capability, and in your case, deliver the service in many respects, right? So can you guys, each of you try to address this concept of what's the metric we need to use for faster?
Sure. As far as what I've seen in the Army and various areas of DoD, the metric for is a contract fast enough is always measured in a pre-award aspect of time to award. Lots of corners tend to be cut to get something awarded faster, and there is seldom the metrics or reporting structure available within the services of the government to report on the post-award impacts of accelerating pre-award activities. We end up with contracts that, yes, they're awarded 6 months faster than the timeline expected, but it takes years or longer to mod them, adjust them, negotiate them to proper execution. That is where I see a lot of the challenges in how we judge faster. It's not just time to award, it's faster to realization of the actual mission objective. As you were saying earlier, like it matters when the soldier clicks that button if what they have works. And if you traded 6 months of pre-award timeline for a year delay, then it's not going to be there when they flip the button.
Yeah, so when I think about that, I tend to think about this, I heard one of the panelists talk about earlier today, it's really more about the marathon than the sprint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you?
Yeah, and so faster, we can't forget the risk of fast but secure. And so yes, I can say faster from cost, schedule, performance, I met that. I could say secure from cybersecurity, but I want to also think about risk in the prospect of, from the perspective of the reputational risk or the risk to the nation as well. So we look at risk broadly. Cybersecurity is just one of those risks. Physical risk, reputational risk to the airmen and guardians, which is paramount, you know, for us as we deliver those capabilities. And so some of the things that the Air Force is doing and the DoD writ large is we have software factories, and you've probably heard of our software ecosystem. And we've implemented those so that we can go and deliver capabilities not in years, but also in minutes. And so in order to do that, as you know, our PPPE process, we think 2 years out if you're a combatant commander, we think 5 years out if you're in the headquarters staff. There is no way I could be as innovative as I need to be thinking 2 years in advance, because the unknown is too broad. And so I have to create a way of developing an ecosystem where what we call a culture of innovation, a culture of curiosity. And we do that by creating this innovation ecosystem whereby we have software factories. One of our software factories is BestSpin, which is in Montgomery, Alabama, which is for our business systems innovation, where we innovate on how do we make things more mobile. And so one of the things when we think about faster is using those types of platforms to be faster, meaning every airman, every guardian is a developer. How do I create an environment where I have citizen coders? So I give them a low-code, no-code environment, give them a place, and then if we decide that, yes, what you develop is something that we should use, then we make that available to others as well. And so that innovation and that curiosity is what also helps us to do things faster. The other thing I like to mention is we have our Spark Tanks, and some of you may be familiar with that. We have pitch day, just like the typical show, Shark Tank, you know, and we have our airmen and guardians. They come and pitch ideas to us. Now, I will tell you, we're the Air Force, so we're the kind of gentler force. Sometimes it's hard for us to say, no, sorry, your idea was not good, or your idea is not ready, but you see Shark Tank, they don't invest in everything. So we've created an ecosystem where we could say, not now. So now no one's feelings are hurt, no work has been lost. We put it on the shelf because maybe it doesn't fit, our priorities at that time. So those types of innovation ecosystems help us do things faster. But it also gives us the opportunity and the diversity of thought across the entire department, because just our PEOs can't do it. I need the airman and guardian that's going to use the capability to think about ways to make it better.
Michael?
Yeah, so to me, there's the obvious like pre-award speed that you can get something done, and like that matters because you've got the idea to the time when you can have people start working on it. So I mean that's absolutely a part of it, but I like the notations around like time to value, time to market, like bringing the idea into production. And I mean we've started since I joined putting out basically standards or setting the stage for like when we start something within cybersecurity at CMS. If you can't get that thing running in production, operationalized at the end of a year, like I'm not renewing your contract. You're out. I don't care. And software projects should not take more than a year to get a basic MVP running, especially when we're buying, maybe off-the-shelf capability and then configuring it, setting up, rolling out. And like that means there's something broken, and I'm not going to throw good money after bad. So like adaptability and time to value are like key, like absolutely key metrics for our program.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you're all talking a little bit about the agility aspect in the acquisition process. I know that up front people want to see that RFP, but sometimes it's better to have the RFI up front, right? So you actually educate the person that's writing the requirements document on what the art of the possible is. I mean, I know that DARPA and other agencies have done very effective work with OTAs in that arena, and sometimes there are other acquisition tools that help you in that space. So you all sort of alluded to that, but that balance of time. So there's a front end pre-RFP to educate, and then there's the actual contract award. And then Michael alluded to after the award, you're still managing the overall acquisition time. So can we sort of talk about that after award and how you mature the capability? I think Dina, you weren't actually looking at it.
We were teasing about my name earlier. That's why I was teasing him. And so the reason I gave you the number 45 is because in the Department of the Air Force, there's probably 45 different organizations that have money that can acquire things. And you know the mantra, have money, we'll spend. So how do I put standards and put controls around where they're spending that money and the priorities around that? So just think about this. When you are becoming an acquisition professional in the Department of the Air Force, we send you to DAU, Defense Acquisition University, and we give you what we consider to be the skills in order to be basic acquisition. And then as you go through time, you go level 1, level 2, level 3. But most often, those acquisition professionals do not have industry experience and have not been to industry, so they have not walked a mile in your shoes. They have not been on the other side. So here's the other thing I want you to remember besides the number 45 when you remember that I had this talk with you today. Talk to me, my acquisition professionals, about how we could be creative in the FAR and the DFAR. You know it. You know what works. I know you assume that I have the answer because I'm the government, and so when you come to me, I have all the answers. I don't, right? So when you come, tell me some options. Tell that acquisition, that KO, because maybe they aren't thinking. Yes, we have an entire acquisition process on how we develop the acquisition strategy. We have a milestone decision authority that approves that strategy, yes. But when you're in those conversations, those industry days and those RFIs, start throwing out ideas from your side of the table on how we should consider. You say an OTA? For our enterprise IT as a service, we used an OTA for that. It was great. It allowed us to learn. We had some risk reduction effort. We figured out what was going to be the right solution, and then we developed the contract, and we now are waiting an award. That was a perfect opportunity. But so I need you to help us be creative in the space, creative legally, in the space, because we don't have the answer. So I think that's one thing. And we talked earlier about the training of the acquisition professionals. If you're acquiring IT, my KO probably doesn't understand IT. Of course, they have an IPT, an integrated product team, that's going to help them understand the IT requirements. But again, you're partnering this with me. When we succeed, it's as a team. Because I promise you, if I put you on contract and it doesn't work, I'm never going to take credit. I'm going to blame you. And so let's be partners in this, right? If I have hired you and it is because I have a problem to solve, a wicked problem. I don't have the staff, I don't have the skill or the experience to do it, but you do, and you work with me on that. When I am not doing what you're asking me to do, please speak up. Speak up, speak up, speak up. Tell me. And when I don't listen, talk to you. That's what the core is for. That is your opportunity to raise that flag. Don't wait until it's CPAR time. And I say, yeah, they work with me, but they were so-so. Don't do that, because I want to be good partners with you. That's why I'm sharing this with you, to make sure that as we enter, because the contract is an agreement and it's a partnership between me and you, even though I may be the one required to certify in the results, but it's still a partnership. So to be good partners, let's make sure that we communicate and you help me be smarter.
Since you already talked about the OTA concept in there, so I'd like to turn it over to Robert, if I could, in that space, because when we do an OTA, we often think about it as a proof of concept, but it also is fast to failure. It gives you a short-term opportunity to evaluate a contract and evaluate performance, and if you don't like where it's going, you can actually turn it off and work that arena. And you sort of alluded to that in your previous answer, right?
Yeah, I think that is a fallacy in government, if I'm being real. There is so many, like, show of hands, how many people have seen an experiment that never turned off?
Yeah.
I know I have. Yeah, hands. So, like, you have to predict and expect that your experiments, your hypotheses, your POCs are just going to live forever. They're going to be zombie projects that you cannot kill and cannot get rid of because they just have their hooks in things. And so, like, it sounds great in theory, but I love what you're saying about, like, having these sort of ecosystems of experimentation and innovation, because it becomes easier to throw ideas in the trash. Like I'm still going through in our program things with the red pen. Like in the last 2.5 years, I have been shutting things off, terminating projects, even like projects that started well above my head, shutting those things down because they're not adding value, ripping tools out because they're not operationalized. They gotta go. Like we have to, as a federal workforce. I mean, just even if you're in the private sector, like your focus is one of the most critical assets, in my opinion, that you have as a team. Like, yes, you have money. Yes, you've got connections. Yes, you've got political capital, but your focus is so important. And we undervalue it all the time when we just bring in more stuff. And every experiment that we don't actually treat like an experiment just erodes and eats away at your focus. And that, I think, it's so harmful, because then you just end up with, oh, it's just one more thing. It's just one more status meeting. It's just one more weekly check-in. It's just one more this. It's one more that. It's not that much budget. It's a small item on the line item on the budget. But that plus the 10 other things that fall into the same category start to really add up. And that's not good.
I think it's a great point. I mean, I do like the philosophy of trying to bridge that valley of death to get something to the field, but at the same time, you have to be smart and prioritize the limited resources you have and cut off those programs.
You have to lay your pride down.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of, so like when I started at CMS, like I started pointing at projects like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Well, such and such thought it was a good idea. Such and such directed us to do it. And like, we're doing it as my project. It's my thing. And it's hard. And I get it. Like, it's hard to lay down something that maybe you brought into fruition that's not working. You don't want it to reflect badly on you. You don't want your performance reviews to take a hit. You don't want, whatever the thing is, you don't want to look bad. And so, like, as leaders, we need to not be grading based on some like arbitrary grading in terms of performance based on some arbitrary, is your project there and is it like working? Because Like, let's say if I grade a system on how many vulnerabilities they have, or how many vulnerabilities they found, they're gonna game the system, and they're not gonna look that hard for their vulnerability. They're not gonna scan all the things. They're not gonna do, software composition analysis and deep penetration tests and your network scanning and your cloud security posture management. They're not gonna look across the spectrum of their tech stack for more vulnerabilities because I'm measuring and I'm metricizing the wrong thing. And I think we need to do more of that in the performance management space when it comes to like institutionalizing risk-taking, like true risk-taking and experimentation. I don't think we do a good job at it as the federal government, as an enterprise. And I mean, I'm a part of that now. And like, we've been experimenting with the way that we do performance management. And I don't think we've landed on the right answer yet, but like, we're trying.
Right. So I do like the idea that it's a team sport, and that both of you alluded to that space. So how do you promote that culture? I mean, to make it, it's not the we, they across the contract table, but it's how do we get to that point?
I mean, you heard Candace say this morning, we are trained as executives, don't talk to industry, because if you do, that could be an ethics violation, especially if they do business right. When I was at USDA as a CISO, I just had a vendor management program that I wanted the vendors come and talk to me. And I said, here's what I want to know. And I told them in advance. If you tell me where your tool fits within my ecosystem, tied to the cybersecurity framework, identify, detect, protect, respond, recover, that's the first thing I wanted to know. Then tell me what I bought and tell me if I'm using it. So bring me some usability statistics, bring me some consumption
Data.
statistics, right? And so we could have a conversation. And I was really honest about, hey, I'm going to do a rationalization because I'm tool rich and I don't have enough money. But I said the same thing to everyone. So I didn't show any favoritism. And also, if I met you and you said I want to meet with you, I really didn't meet with you. But I did have a vendor management system that said, you need to fill out this questionnaire and tell me why we're meeting. But I'd also tell you is thank you for that, but that's not where I'm looking right now. That's not a priority. So I was honest. So I think you build that by trust. You have to trust me. I have to trust you. And then also, I have to tell you, I'm not going to string you along either. If it's not going to work, I'm going to tell you. No kidding. It's just the way I was raised, right? I'm not going to lie. And I've done that. And so here in this seat, it's same. Now, when you're in DOD, it's even more scrutiny. Don't talk to vendors. It's, right? I mean, just to come here today, I had to say, what are you going to talk about? What are going to be the questions? You got to get approval. I had to do that before I came here today. And so I have to make sure I say things that are already in the public ecosystem, just for my protection, right? But again, if I don't work with you, this is a whole nation problem, right? When I was at USDA, it was about food safety, food security, food insecurity. Got it. At DOD, it's about democracy, and I want to protect that, right? And so in order to do that, it's a whole of nation thing, and that means a public-private partnership with you and me. So we have to have trust with each other. So you build that when you, again, with the RFIs, with the industry days, let's be honest about what we want and what we need from you as well.
So you mentioned the data. So I know that Michael talked earlier this morning about we collect data in DOD and other federal organizations like EMAS, and there are these information silos, and we actually need to do a better job of linking them together to share information. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely. So to build on what both Menace and Robert were saying, part of the way to enable this is to better define success on the government side. The way the DoD works in general is relatively segmented and siloed. The requirements come down from into a organization that's works through a PM of some type or a PEO that writes an acquisition that's then that gets input from a technical organization that then gets awarded and executed by a gaining command or an executing command. Maybe it's a COCOM, maybe it's an agency. So you have this CIO, high-level seniors to acquisition command to competition, then execution handed off somewhere else. And each organization defines its own project schedule, its own schedule to time to award, time to delivery, time to develop the packages. But there's seldom a cross-function, cross-schedule, cross-organization path to success. And if the PEO or PM is prioritizing time to award in that aspect, then they're not necessarily prioritizing time to value, time to delivery. If the gaining command is prioritizing that, they're not necessarily prioritizing the input to the acquisition. Same thing with CIOs. So unifying that whole schedule to delivery is, I think, super key in order to get these things executed properly. You need to look at the entire objective, as you said, getting the capability to the warfighter, and as you said, pointing out the actual time where we realize that value of the execution. Your schedule shouldn't look like, okay, this project schedule ends when we're successful here. It actually is successful when this date of availability to a soldier is achieved. And anything in between that can flex left and right as long as that date's achieved. So perhaps a longer pre-award, more industry days, more RFIs to get a faster execution would be beneficial. Perhaps we really don't know what we want, and we want a rapid prototype, or we want some type of OTA and a smaller award so that we can get on keyboards faster. That holistic view of achieving delivery and what qualitative metrics are going to be available to measure success of that delivery is where we should be looking. But the way our system is structured, the KOs are not incentivized to look in that aspect. The gaining commands don't really start looking aside from requirements provision until they're handed the contract post-source selection. Prioritization from the higher level seniors doesn't necessarily take into account the other aspects. We see this also, as we talked about earlier, similar issues of siloed information occurring. If an incident occurs on a contract, that is like a security incident, that is a reportable instance as part of the contractual aspect in the PWS. Probably will go to the KO. The Corps and the KO will be informed there was a security incident, and the ISSM or CISO of the organization will probably be informed. Doesn't necessarily obligate them to go to, say, our cyber or CERT team or move beyond that. In fact, many KOs would be like, okay, they'll treat it as a contractual action. There was a violation, there's a set response in the contract, an incident response process, it was executed, great, they were compliant, what's our next siege rule, what's our next CPAR? From the contract officer's perspective, as non-security experts, there's no further action for them or impetus for action at that point. So as we were talking this morning in the breakfast, linking systems such as PD squared or an EMAS or security reporting sessions, the portal you guys spoke about, with a contractual action, so the contract officer takes an action and that reports to the security system, which creates an impetus for an action on the other side. Those API calls are not excessively difficult, but the organizations are siloed. So my big ask to the government leads and the seniors and the audience would to be look at the bigger picture of time to deployment and actual triggers that require contract actions into technical actions of the appropriate organization, and incentivize your contractors, put in the shall statements and the directions for them to execute that cross outside of that little bubble of delivery, because you're not going to get to proper delivery without following through in those steps. And as Robert said, don't be afraid to terminate or send those cure notices. There are many times where I think sometimes the leads are shy about sending those things for fear of the response or backlash or appearance of a failed effort. But as you said, there are many efforts that just aren't providing value, and establishing those metrics up front, flowing that information to the appropriate groups that can take action, and looking at the holistic time to delivery and using that to inform your acquisition strategy as government leads would be a lot better for holistic delivery to the shoulder.
Well, and I mean, there's bad news and there's failure from a, sorry, I'm pointing, I talk with my hands. There's bad news and such from a leadership standpoint, like the leader might not want to acknowledge they failed in some way or what have you. But I think something that we have struggled with is getting our industry partners to share bad news, to tell us when something is not working. And this is one thing that grinds my gears a lot, is you end up getting close to these major milestones in a contract, and the Fed lead, the GTL is everything's good, everything sounds good, like they're delivering some awesome looking slide decks and like everything's amazing, and then you get in and you start asking harder questions or more like pointed questions, and it turns out everything's not great. And it's because, we weren't talking about like the elephants in the room or sharing that, oh, we had this constraint that like delayed us 3 months here and 6 months there, and things just weren't working, and this other thing was broken, and we needed help, but we didn't want to ask for it, and like that stuff is so damaging to the overall effort. And so like I love that you like called out partnership, because like you're not going to succeed if that's the case, if you're sort of like sweeping things under the rug and afraid to or nervous about bringing forward bad news. The government leaders should not be raking you over the coals for sharing bad news. They should be celebrating it and working proactively with you to help alleviate your constraints and help you cross those hurdles and all of that. And even like security incidents happen. Everyone is like, we like to sort of rest on our laurels of like, if it's not if but when, but then when something actually happens, we like to we shift into the finger pointing, blame and shame culture, and that also is just, it's not helpful, and it reinforces this stigma around people not wanting to share bad news. And like whether it's vulnerabilities that haven't been patched, libraries that haven't been updated, tech debt that needs to be remediated, something that is just broken and they don't have the prioritization to fix it, whatever that bad news is, like we have to create better cultures of openness and trust and all of that stuff. And that sort of stuff is so foundational to actually moving quickly, because if you're just kind of sweeping everything under the rug, then like it might look like you're moving quickly, but then when you go to actually jump and like move into value, you're going to fall flat on your face. Yeah. And it's not actually going to be fast or agile or whatever.
Yeah, unlike wine and cheese, bad news does not get better over time, right?
No, it's like milk.
It's like,
Yeah.
So a little different turn, if I could. So there's been a lot of talk on the new U.S. national cybersecurity strategy about shifting responsibility. So the theory is that the users are bearing all the risk burden. And so how could you possibly shift left somewhere in the development cycle and maybe even look at Section 230 where you're given a pass for all the software development and there's no liability associated with that space? Do we see something evolving there in the partnership for how we would use criteria to decide what's good enough? I always talk about the fact that whenever you're making a decision, I need a new capability, it's, am I going to make it or buy it, right? If I'm going to make it, then I design the software in-house, or if I'm going to buy it, then I'm looking for a COTS product, I'm looking for something that's already developed out there. And once you decide on COTS, then is it fit for use? Is that COTS product going to be something I can build into my enterprise and use it? Now, in the best case scenario, I think you use open source standards, you use commercially acceptable global sourcing standards for hardware or software to build that in your enterprise. And what we probably want to avoid, even though you have to use it sometime, is the fully customized code, the fully customized hardware product, because it costs you more. So which one of you wants to take that on in that perspective?
So I'll add two things to that. One, DevSecOps really should be the standard, right? If you built it in, then at the end you don't have to worry about it. Then it just becomes this continuous ATO. You hear DoD talks about it all the time. The continuous ATO, meaning that yes, I'm doing the right scanning that I need, whether it's static or dynamic code scanning, it doesn't matter. I'm DevSecOps, and then I have a two-person integrity. When the problem's found, the engineer that develop is not the same person that fixes it, right? So I do that two-person integrity, make sure I have that separation of duties. But the other piece, and so that's part of what we do in our software factories, is making sure that we create this continuous process so you don't have to keep going back to the AO well to say, will you please approve this? No, let's just empower you, tell you what the standards are in advance, and then you build to those standards. But that's why also the software bill of material is important, because we will have to engage and use open source software. And so, but having that SBOM is definitely going to be critical for us. And so in the Air Force, we have a program that we call Eagle Eye, and where we start to build out, what does SBOM look like when we start to build, even in the agile way, software. And so making sure that we can promulgate that in just our standard processes. And then we have to make sure when you talk shift to the left, it's a workforce piece that we're not talking about either. You cannot forget the people. We're a tool-rich environment. Yes, I have capabilities that meet tools, but what are you doing to reskill, retool, upskill your workforce for this new agile way in which we want to deliver capabilities? We don't think about that. We have a whole process of we hire to retire. When I hire you as a civilian, I want you to stay till you reach your MRA in 30 years and then you go. Well, not really, right? I really want to have the opportunity for my workforce to come in and out. You work for a while and maybe you want to go to industry, learn something, come back, you pick up where you left off. I mean, we do that with the military every day. You sign a 4-year contract or a 6-year contract, and you could leave. And I say, thank you for your service. But with our civilian workforce, we don't do that. And so we have a program we call CyTap. It's our common information, our cyber and IT exchange program that allows industry to come into DoD, and it allows us as civilians to go out so we can have that exchange. Why? Because as I said earlier, the acquisition professionals that you're dealing with have not been on your side, most of them. I'm not going to say all because I can't be definitive, but I will tell you most of them have not. And so these type of exchange programs create that. And so when you're talking to cybersecurity strategy, yes, move to the left. Let's share the responsibility and the risk from a cyber perspective, but let's not forget about the risk in our workforce. We don't keep them retooled with the right skills. And so I think that's a piece that's missing as well.
Great. So Michael and Robert have closing comments. That was a great wrap up there from your perspective. You brought the SBOM into the discussions, which I think is a critical part of the discussion we're having today. Software bill of materials. CISA actually has the ICT Scrum Task Force, and there's a working group that's actually trying to define what the software bill of materials looks like. What's the content? Because it's going to have to be something that's machine readable and how you're going to deliver it to a customer and they can do something with it. Now, I think there's real value. Synopsys is actually leading some of that work in that arena. So the anchors on either side of this like to comment a little bit on software bill of materials.
Yeah, I'm gonna advocate that instead of creating another freaking standard for us all to deal with, let's tap into SPDX, Cyclone DX,
Agreed.
VEX integrated standard. Those are out there. They're already being used. They're adopted. There's tooling around them.
And they're heavily leaning that direction.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it's really important also that yes, DevSecOps minded cultures are important. Yes, shift left is important, yada, yada, yada. SBOMs are going to provide a lot of transparency into transitive dependencies that we might be including in custom code. Yes, that's all good, but we cannot, as part of this movement, neglect a day 2 operations mindset and ownership mindset over the things that we are doing. The whole point, and this is me putting my me with my startup bias, the whole point of something like a movement, a culture, a mindset like DevSecOps is more autonomy and ownership over the things that you're building from an end-to-end lifecycle state. You build it, you run it, you secure it, you operate it, and you fix it when it goes off the rails. And if you aren't thinking about day 2 ops, then you're doing it wrong. And so you've got it, and an SBOM shows you what you're bringing in, but it's not going to show you how you're using the things that you've brought in. For example, you can relate it to a SaaS product. I could bring in a SaaS product. That doesn't mean that they've done their part and it's fine. You can use a SaaS product, even a very secure SaaS product, wildly insecurely. And you can do the same thing with open source components and all of that stuff. So we cannot neglect day 2 ops.
So final comments, Michael, if you could.
Yep, I would based
Either
on-
workforce or SBOM, whichever one you want to
Sure, I actually going to talk a bit about the perception of using these standards. The DevSecOps integration with applying standards and utilizing both SaaS and software tools with the industry should not be adversarial. I had a number of experiences working with contract officers who were implementing some of these standards, the list of materials, the approved products, and the general perception that we had in a number of these working group sessions was we have to force the industry, we have to force the developers, we have to force the people to adopt these security things because we need so much more security in DoD. And the perception, the adversarial perception that is just overwhelmingly present in the acquisition approach to enforcing security and DevSecOps is not optimal, not correct. It's not in anybody's interest. The thought process that the industry and the vendors would not want to enhance the security of their products is kind of crazy. If you go to them with, hey, we want better DevSecOps, we want to scan things, and by the way, yeah, anything you develop that would improve security, integrate it into your normal product suite, integrate it into your delivery. Those should be seen as positive cooperation. Don't go at the industry and the vendors pushing these standards with an adversarial tact on your engagement. Go with it as a partnership, as Vince, what you said much earlier. You need to work with them. They want to improve their products. You want their products to be better. This is a win-win scenario, so everybody on both sides should approach it as such. Vendors, don't be scared of the government coming at you with a giant STIG checklist and scans and telling you to fix it. They're doing free security research on your product. It's a benefit to you. Government, when they come at you saying, hey, it's going to take me 3 months to make a brand new patch, but I'll be better, great, that's a win for you, it's a win for everybody. These standards allow us to communicate cooperatively and in a partnership, not adversarially, so just make sure you approach it like that.
Thank you. Robert, Venus, Michael?